The alien commander stood before the human prisoner with confusion written across her silver features, and her crystalline eyes studied him carefully as he sat calmly in the detention cell, despite being captured 3 cycles ago. Her name was Valara, and she belonged to the Xinthian Empire, a race that had conquered 40 star systems through superior technology and cold, calculated warfare. And they had never lost a battle until they encountered the humans. The human before her was called Jake Mitchell, a soldier from Earth who had been separated from his unit during the Battle of Kepler Station, and Valara had interrogated dozens of prisoners before, but none like him. "Show me that feeling again," she said gently as she moved closer to the energy barrier separating them. Jake looked up at her with those strange, warm brown eyes that seemed to hold depths her people could never understand. And he smiled despite his circumstances, which made no logical sense to her. "What feeling?" he asked. Though he knew exactly what she meant. "You know what I speak of," Valara replied, and her voice carried a tremor that would have embarrassed her in front of her subordinates. "And when your fleet was losing and your ships were burning, you did not retreat." Jake leaned back against the wall and his smile grew sadder. "Yeah, we don't really do that," he said, "and we fight for each other." Valara had reviewed the battle recordings countless times, and the human vessels had been outmatched and outgunned. Yet when one ship fell, 3 more rushed to defend the survivors, and they sang while they fought. And the listening post had picked up their communications, and they told jokes and spoke of their families even as they died. Her people fought for duty, for rank, for the glory of the Empire. But these humans fought for something else entirely, and something she could not quantify in her reports. "Please, human," she said more quietly now, and her hand touched the barrier controls, "and explain it to me." The energy field dissolved, and Valara stepped into the cell, breaking every protocol she had established. And Jake watched her approach with that same calm acceptance that unnerved her so deeply. "My little sister Katie used to be scared of thunderstorms," began, "and she would run into my room crying when the lightning flashed, and I would hold her and tell her stories until she fell asleep." Valara listened, and her advanced mind processing his words but struggling with their significance. "That feeling, you want to understand," he continued, "and it's not something we turn on for battle, and it's just always there." He stood slowly and non-threateningly, and Valara noticed again how much smaller humans were compared to her kind. Yet they had fought her, warriors to a standstill. "When my friend Danny got hit by plasma fire," Jake said, "and I didn't run to him because command ordered it, and I ran because the thought of him dying alone was unbearable, and we carried him 2 miles through enemy fire, and he still died, but he died knowing we came for him." Valara's crystalline eyes began to shimmer in a way she had never experienced before, and her species had genetically removed most emotional responses millennia ago, deeming them inefficient for warfare. And yet something in his words created a cascade of unfamiliar sensations in her neural pathways. "You feel this for all your kind?" she asked. "Not just humans," Jake replied. "And during the colony wars, my unit found a crashed Xinthian scout ship. And inside were 3 of your people still alive, and we pulled them from the wreckage and treated their wounds." Valara stepped back as if physically struck. "And that is impossible," she said, "and we found no record of this, because they never reported it." Jake said, with that gentle smile again, "And your empire would have executed them for being captured, and we sent them home in an escape pod with medical supplies and never told anyone." The alien commander felt her carefully constructed worldview fracturing, and she had been taught that emotion was weakness, that attachment was a liability, that victory required the suppression of all non-tactical responses, and yet these humans, with their love and loyalty and irrational compassion, had fought her empire to a stalemate. "Show me," she whispered, "and show me how to feel what you feel." Jake extended his hand, and Valara stared at it for a long moment before placing her 3-fingered hand in his, and his skin was warm, where hers was cool, his grip gentle, but firm. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "This is foolish," she protested, but complied anyway. "Think about someone you lost," he said quietly, "and not in battle, but before, and someone who mattered." Valara's mind drifted to her brood sister Kira, who had been decommissioned for showing excessive attachment to her unit, and Valara had reported her herself, believing it was her duty, and she had not thought of Kira in cycles, having buried the memory deep. The grief hit her like a plasma blast, and her legs nearly gave out, and Jake caught her supporting her weight as tremors ran through her body. "That's it," he said gently. And that's the feeling, and it hurts, doesn't it? Valara made a sound her species had no word for, and tears began streaming down her silver face, and she had not cried since she was a juvenile before the genetic modifications, before the Empire stripped away everything that made her people vulnerable. I killed her. She gasped. And I reported Kira, and they decommissioned her. And I killed my sister. Jake held her as she wept, and his arms around her were steady and warm. And for the first time in her long military career, Valara understood why humans fought so fiercely. And they fought because they loved, and love made them stronger, not weaker. Hours passed, and eventually Valara's sobs quieted, and she pulled back, looking at Jake with new understanding in her crystalline eyes. We have been wrong, she said, and her voice was hoarse. And my entire civilization has been wrong. Jake nodded, and maybe he said, but you can change. Valara stood straighter, and her military training reasserting itself, but now filtered through this new emotional awareness. And I must release you. She decided, you will be executed for that. Jake observed calmly. Yes, she agreed, but it will be worth it, because for the first time in my life I understand what it means to make a choice based on something other than logic. She moved to the control panel and began entering override codes, and the facility alarms would trigger soon, and her career and life would end. But strangely, she felt lighter than she had in years. Jake, she said as the cell doors opened. He paused and looked back at her. Thank you, she said, and thank you for showing me what it means to be truly alive. He smiled that warm human smile, and good luck, Commander. And I hope you find more of your people who are ready to remember how to feel. Valara watched him disappear down the corridor, and she knew security forces were already mobilizing, and her execution was certain. But as she felt her heart beating with newfound purpose, and as she understood finally the strength that came from choosing compassion over duty, she realized the humans had already won, not through superior weapons or tactics, but through something far more powerful. And they had reminded her that beneath armor and genetic modification and imperial programming, there was still a person capable of love and grief and hope. The security team burst through the doors, and their weapons trained on her, and Valara did not resist, and she smiled for the first time in decades. And in that moment, she was free.